It's tabletop time!
I'm Jazza.
I'm Murray.
And I am bequeathing unto my friend Murray here a conversion that I made a couple of years ago now for October. It's finally time to finish this bad boy off.
It is time, literally. It's time that he saw a little bit of love and just a little bit of finished.
I started this project and it sat unfinished for a long time. So I'm going to take you through the journey of getting this far, which I was really excited about back when I was working on it. A conversion of a scrapjet to put as many rockets on there as possible with the original intent for it to turn into a diorama. And that's where we'll pick right up again. But let's first go to the past. Forgive that this is all in image format because this was all done in my personal hobby time and tabletop time didn't exist yet. So these were just photos I took for myself to share the process that I'll take you through briefly.
So this was a conversion project using both the Orcs Megatrack Scrapjet and of course the Orcs and a whole bunch of rockets from an Orcs Stormboys box. The Scrapjet just looked super cool but sparse enough that I could add a whole bunch of rocket action to it and make the Orcs be forcing it to go faster! I built the entire scrapjet all the way up to putting the pilot in, and this is where my conversion work began. I separated all of the rockets from all of the Stormboys in the Stormboys box and took one of those Stormboys that I could convert and pose to be at the back fin wing, strapping himself to all of these new rockets all chained to the scrapjet in an absurd orcish fashion with our additional orky boy on the top back, ready to throw one of his bombs. With a little bit of green stuff love, this is the result of my conversion, including a little gremlin flying off of the back with a chain. I absolutely loved making this conversion project and giving it a sense of motion. The custom green stuff work in particular is the banner on top of the scrapjet, which again adds that sense of motion, and the scarf on the pilot of the scrapjet. I wanted as much stuff to be flying and flailing back in the motion of the scrapjet as possible, including this little grot here. He was really fun to pose, and while it was tricky getting the chains to be super glued in the upright pose and to actually hold him in midair, it worked, and it worked so well. I base coated everything in a chaos black, and this was a project I really wanted to play around with weathering in. At the time of making this conversion, I was re-entering the hobby as an adult, and there were so many new tools and methods that I'd never played with before. And in particular with this one, I wanted to play with some crackling effects. To do this, it turns out you apply the crackle effect to the area that you want to reveal to, which I had done here liberally to all of the surface that I would paint of the scrapjet. It's invisible because it dries clear. And then I put on a pretty healthy coat of a plain yellow acrylic paint. And when both layers had been applied and fully dried, that's when I came back with a rough brush and water and scrubbed away to try and reveal and enjoy the crackle effect for the first time. I'm really glad I actually filmed some little snippets of this process because I did actually capture my first ever experience using this crackle effect, and I think it looks really cool. And here is the simple after of my before and after of the crackle effect. And again, this is just two tones, the base tone of the brownish grey and now my weathered yellow painted and crackled on top. For a first time effect, I thought this worked out really cool. Next, it was a matter of going through and painting from the bottom up on my orcs and the scrapjet. Skin and textures and materials on top all the way up to the metallics and details of the scrapjet. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have mini painting cameras to film the process with, so enjoy this lovely collage of pictures with some epic orky music. As you can see, I had so much fun with the weathering effect, I came back and applied it again with some coloured paints on top. Here it is with the flat colours and, of course, with the effect applied with the crackle underneath, but in this instance, the crackling effect was applied on top of a brassy base tone layer, so it's showing through to metallics rather than the black that the yellow does, and I think this provides a little bit of contrast and works really well. And this is me posing, pretending to paint for an Instagram photo, I'm pretty sure, because I couldn't actually practically paint while holding my phone, but hey, I posed and it looks cool. Yeah.
And here we have it. I would say from my approach, this would be 90-95% done. Like I was going to come out with just some final highlights. I'm happy for you to make some changes or redos and tweaks and stuff because I trust the Murray painting of anything always looks great. But it's time to workshop the diorama. I'm gonna take you through the vision I had.
Yeah.
Let you take that in any direction you want.
Cool. Love it.
So the original vision I had was that this would be barreling through the air. So the front wheels sort of like suspended. I imagine like having a cork and bit of terrain that you'd use as a road or a freeway with like some rubble. And I pictured all of it on a large sort of oval plinth.
Yeah, like there's been a big earthquake that's kicked up.
Yeah, and they're just doing a big fucking jump off the end. Like, the purpose of like my goal for this vehicle was like texture and weathering. And I think the intent was that the terrain would have like a lot of dirt and mud. So like having that kick up into the dust.
Some nice Mad Max rubble around the place.
Yeah, 100%. Now, you don't want me to do this, Murray, but it's Murray's birthday as we're filming this. Hey, happy birthday in the comments to Murray!
Hey!
Look at this birthday.
I'm building an orc I'm finishing an orc for my birthday.
What a birthday. What a birthday treat.
It couldn't be better, really.
Take it away, Murray.
Oh, I will.
Now, to bring Jazz's dreams of aeronautical automobile to life, I first had to find a base for this entire diorama to be put on. So I found one of these old cake trays that I think just picked up from the supermarket. Next, I grabbed all my materials, all the corkboard, and set about basically posing in mid-air where I wanted the Orkmobile to be. This involved a lot of and zoom noises, which is an integral part of the process. Creating rubble out of corkboard usually looks best when you have no plan and you're just organically tearing bits apart. However, the road, I needed to have at least a certain width to it to make the vehicle fit on it. So I roughly measured out where I wanted and then just tore bits apart to get rid of any hard edges. To bulk up the earth that is pivoted out of the ground, forcing our road into a ramp, I'm going to use polystyrene pieces to just fill up all this area. I considered using corkboard, but then I realized that was going to use quite a lot of corkboard and basically be quite a bit of waste. After looking up some reference images online on how roads crack and deteriorate, I then cracked the corkboard into what I hope is a fairly realistic manner that a road would deteriorate naturally, or violently under an explosion, perhaps. Now, even though I've finished building my roads, I'm going to continue using corkboard to bulk up the surrounding area. This will give a nice natural flow to the land around the area. And also, I'm going to continue this crack in the ground where the road has pivoted around to further simulate the idea that there was an earthquake or an explosion nearby. As a little finishing touch, I prepared some small terrain pieces that will be applied as they become convenient to add as I paint and weather the area. This little sign is going to be a final edition, and I have a little plan as to what's going to be written on it. Now, for the bulk of the basing itself, I've mixed up some Sculpt-It with a whole lot of ruddy red pigment. While I'm going to paint over this ruddy color will help show through the layers of paint and help with this really nice red desert. If you couldn't tell already, I'm going to aim for a very Mad Max desert, very Australian red sands, or just an alien red sand perhaps. With that setting, I then added PVA to the base and applied all the very loose basing material and sand itself, making sure I applied it where the sand would rest naturally and pile up. I've mixed at least 2 different grades of sand and pebbles in here to give that natural and randomized feel. I find if you just have one type, it just looks a little bit manufactured and unnatural. At this stage, I'm going to glue down some of the larger terrain and prop features, as it will be more convenient to paint them along with the base right now. It was coming towards the end of the day and I wanted to prepare my smoke plumes beforehand. Essentially, I wanted to dye them a color and let them dry overnight. Now, when doing smoke or fire plumes, you want to start with the innermost color first, so of course I went for a yellow. Now, I wanted to use alcoholic ink, but we only had tangerine. That was the closest I had to yellow, so I also added in a healthy amount of acrylic ink as well, and mixing it together, I got this concoction. Now I'm just gonna shove all the cotton wool buds in and soak them thoroughly. Squeeze them until most of the liquid comes out, and then lay them out to dry. As a final touch, I'm just going to pull them apart a little bit as they're sort of condensing, and by doing this it'll help them dry a bit faster. Now Jazza has pretty much finished painting this orc buggy, but there's a couple of extra things we need to do, including taking it off the base. Now it's more convenient to paint on a base, but we're going to have it launching off a road, and it just won't do to have it still on, as we want it to be cresting over and leaving the ramp itself. As the buggy is also going to be an upturned angle, the underside is going to be visible. Now usually we can get away with not painting the underside models because they're glued to a base and you just won't see them. However, now we will. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a base coat underneath here. I'm not looking to blend this wonderfully. I'm just trying to get in some colors and tonal values. Because of course this car is in a desert and it's going to be absolutely riddled with dirt and dust and sand, so we're going to weather the life out of it. I just want to get the base tone values in there. Okay, with that done, I'm just going to add a little more popping around to areas, mainly in just giving some very small spot highlights around to emphasize the scratches and damage around the vehicle. Now the orc skin looks great. I think Jazz has done a really good job with it. I'm just going to add a little bit of a spot highlight as we are in a desert, so these orcs are going to be very glossy and sweaty? Do orcs sweat? I don't even know. It's time to spray the pizza!
It's too windy. Back inside.
Now starting with purple might be a little bit of a weird idea, but it's going to sit in the recesses and the shadows and give that really cool effect, which will contrast immediately with the hot outer surfaces that are being blasted by the sun. Then I'm going to give that a zenithal with a brown, then moving to a red to spray fairly certain but also random areas just to give a little bit of visual interest. Move back to the brown to weather down some of the more red areas, and then go up to a yellow. This will be more or less the average tone of our desert. Keeping in mind that we're also going to dry brush and weather with pigments later. Okay, we have our little desert-scape. With the diorama now sprayed, it is time to block in all the big areas, namely the road itself. I mixed together black, brown, and blues to create a sort of asphalt color, and then I proceeded to stipple and drag the paint around so I could blend it into the more sandy areas. I also applied this paint onto some of the metal areas I have sticking out of the ground. This is just to add a bit more contrast and variance, and when I put the metals over the top, it's going to pop even more. As I planned, I used a bone color to heavily dry brush all over the sandy areas, including some of the dirt going up towards the bitumen mound. The soft grey dry brush also helped to highlight the road itself. I decided that the best way to get the impression of a road was to do the little dotted lines that orcs probably don't obey, but they've seen Yumis use them, so they decided they must have a use. And honestly, the more crooked the lines are, the better they are for orcs. Now for the fun time, pigment time. I found that applying liberal doses is the best way to get a nice strong effect, as applying a thinning agent will soften the effect somewhat. And I apply a very healthy amount onto the underside of the buggy itself. For the top of the buggy, I want to apply a good amount of pigment, but I'm also going to be really careful of the nice paint job that Jazza has already done. He's done an excellent job with the chipping, and I want to keep as much of that as possible. Now that we'd finally gotten to doing the smoke effects coming out of the back of the vehicle, I wasn't sure about the cotton wool after all. It just looked a little bit like cotton candy no matter how I placed it on the model. Luckily, Jazza had an idea. We went through his felting wool and found a brown that was exactly the colour of our desert dust. So using this would be absolutely perfect, and giving it a little bit of a rough up and then turning it over in your hands, kneading it a little bit, gave this really cool randomized effect, which was just amazing for billowing dust. So while I know that this car is rocket powered, I want to capture the moment of the huge plume of dust as it charges its way up this ramp, leaving a huge billowing cloud and two streaking trails where the wheels have left their mark. Now, Jazza had stated that he wanted the front wheels to be overhanging the edge of the ramp, but upon further analysis we decided, why not all the wheels? It would certainly look cooler, and so that's what we're doing. I'm going to attach metal rods to the edges of the track and use this to simulate the effect that the car has actually taken off. This project honestly keeps getting better and better. Now, hopefully with just a little bit of trickery and clever placing, we can hide these rods using our smoke. All that remains now is to show it to Jazza. Hopefully you like it as much as he does.
I thought we had to go to the big bar. Why are we taking the long way? I told you this is a shortcut. Oh, zog it. He's still holding on. He should feel it heating up in about 3, 2, 1.
This is so cool. This is even cooler than I imagined because we've superseded the limits. Like we're defying gravity here. They are absolutely blasting off. It's so good.
It's
well
outrageous.
done. What a bloody way to start off October. That is awesome. Thank you so much to our supporters.
Such crispy names scrolling here. Beautiful, each one of them.
Feel the crunch in your teeth. That's what I'm weird. I make everything weird. I'm sorry. But we made this weird together.
We did. That's what tabletop time is all about. Making things weird.